Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Alabaster Project. My name is Katie, and I am your host. And I am so excited for today's episode. This episode is so special to me because I get to have my sister on the podcast. Krista, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, for those of you who don't know Carissa, Carissa is just a joy to be around. She is just so deep and so rich, and she has wisdom far beyond her years. And so, today I'm really excited for us to be able to kind of dive in and talk a little bit about her story and some of the things that God has been teaching her lately. Because through our conversations, I have gained so much wisdom in my own life. And through what God is teaching her, it has been encouraging to me. And so I hope the same can be true for each of you who are listening. So, Carissa, I'm going to back up your story just a little bit. And I want us to kind of start when we were having conversations about you. You'd graduated from high school, you were moving to Pensacola to get your, I believe it was your bachelor's degree at University of West Florida. And in that time, it was a season where God was calling you to a new place. And so can you talk about what it looks like to follow God when he is leading you into a place where you've never been before, it's uncomfortable, there's a growing pains, there's a lot of fear, anxiety. Just speak into when God calls you to go.
Yes. Um, when I was finishing up high school, finishing up my AA degree, I was looking into different programs and for my bachelor's degree, and I ended up choosing Pensacola. And so the move and the transition to Pensacola, it was hard, but it was fun. And I remember one time at Passion, I can't remember which speaker it was, but they had mentioned that hard and good can coexist. And so that kind of defines that transition period. Um, because moving to Pensacola was super hard simply because I was moving out of Bloodstown, the only town that I had ever lived, ever grown up in. I was leaving my friends, my family, and starting over. But it was also really fun because um towards that move, I was feeling like stifled, I guess, or kind of in this position where I wasn't really growing. And so I was excited to get out and to move and get into this new space where um I could really just kind of discover who I was and everything. And so um it was really fun getting to move to Pensacola and figure out who I was and get to see like how God shaped me and would grow me in that season. Um, and it's like I learned a lot. I learned that I was so much more capable than I realized just because when you move out on your own, you are put in positions and situations where you just have to, kind of sink or swim. And so you really find out how much you're able to do. Um, and I was just able to be free to figure out who I was without the pressure of all these new people knowing who I was before because everybody kind of knew me as a shy, quiet person. And here I didn't have that little stereotype, and I was just able to be myself. And so it was super freeing. And through that, I was able to grow a lot spiritually and personally. And that was like a really big time of growth for me. Um, and it's like God really showed up and he blessed me with like incredible friends during that season that really helped me see like my worth and my value and the importance of being known and um getting to discover who I was and getting to be loved through that discovery and getting that godly support. Um so that being said, Pensacola was just a time where God prepared me and grew me.
Yeah.
And then, um, I had another transition phase into Tallahassee after I finished my bachelor's degree. Um, and so looking back, I got to see that, Pensacola was where God prepared me. And then here in Tallahassee is where God has kind of challenged me.
Ooh.
And he's challenged me to kind of like apply those things that I learned in Pensacola, and it's really helped me grow and thrive while I've been here in Tallahassee. And I didn't realize that at first, but looking back over it, um, you kind of get a better idea of like how God was working. Um, so I guess I should also mention that I did not want to come to Tallahassee. And it was like the last place I wanted to go. I was ready to like hightail it up to Pennsylvania. And it's like I did not want to end up in Tallahassee because it almost felt like a step back. Just because I was moving closer to home and than where I was. And I didn't really appreciate that. But um looking back, it's been really good, and it's been an adjustment for sure, but it's been good.
Yeah. So before you jump any further, I want to first talk about what do you feel like you learned the most about God when you were living in Pensacola?
Um, the thing I learned, the most about God in Pensacola, it was his goodness and his faithfulness to provide. Yeah, that was
Wow,
kind of like the big thing was his faithfulness and his goodness.
that's really cool. So it ended up like you went to Pensacola, you were there for a while, and then, like you mentioned, God called you back to Tallahassee. You didn't want to come back to Tallahassee, but you came. And I want you to speak into how do we follow God when He calls us back to a place where we don't necessarily want to be?
Mhm. It's hard, I'm not gonna lie. um, but um, the thing with moving back to Tallahassee and the thing with when God calls you somewhere. So it's like when you call someone or God calls you, it's like oftentimes you're somewhere and you want them to come and join you. And so it's like when God calls you somewhere, it's not because he's like, okay, I'm going to stay here. You go over there, you do that. And then, maybe we can meet back up. It's like, no, he's already there. He's already prepared the way. He's already prepared that place for you. And he's calling you to come and join him.
Mm,
And he's like prepared this place and he wants you to come and experience what he's prepared for you.
wow.
And so when I first moved or was getting in the process of moving to Tallahassee, um, I got angry with God because I saw how good he was and how faithful he was in that season in Pensacola. And I was angry because I was like, God, you blessed me with like good friends and a good church and a good school and a good community. Why would you take all this goodness away from me? And he was like, I'm not taking it, I'm changing it.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't really make it easier because I still have to leave all of this behind. And it's still really hard to leave all this goodness behind because you have to let go of the goodness for the unknown. And you
mm,
have to let go of all of that in order to fully step into what he's called you to next. And that's really hard to wrap your mind around
yeah.
because, we don't like the unknown. It's scary. You don't know what's over there. And um so through that, God told me, he was like, I'm not taking the goodness, I'm changing it. And good is still good, even when it doesn't look like what we want it to. Um, and
That's really
so during that season, I learned the definition of bittersweet because I was still, kind of in Pensacola, kind of transitioning to Tallahassee, and I was like back and forth a lot. And it's like you were trying to hold on to those moments that you had in Pensacola as long as you could and as much as you could because you knew it was going to change. It wasn't going to be the same. Even when you go back to visit or, see those people again, it's like you will have changed. They will have changed. Everything will be different. And so it's like you'll never get that same moment again. And that's really difficult to deal with. Um, And so I remember I was writing and I wrote, I was like, it's scary. I'm not sure if I'm ready to let go of what I have now. I keep praying that I will be ready, and I don't know if I ever will be, but I have to do it anyways. And I'm learning that's okay too, to do things scared, to know the next step is where I'm supposed to be, but that doesn't make it easier. And so it's again letting go of what's good for something that's unknown.
Mm,
Um,
that's good.
and so I also learned that, you know, God is good. And when he calls you someplace, um, he can't be anything but good. And so no matter where you go, as long as you're following God, it's gonna be good and there's gonna be goodness because he's good and he can't be anything but good.
Mm, I love that. I want did you have more to say before I ask you your next question?
Let's go
You
for it.
look like you had a thought, and so I didn't want to interrupt the thought.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So during this time, you and we talked a lot about this analogy that you gave to me about the hallway. Can you share that analogy? Because I think it's just so powerful and I think it will be helpful for so many people.
Yeah. So the hallway is another thing that I call the transition period. And so for me, the hallway is like this dark, plain hallway. There's like one door on one side, that was Pensacola, one door on the other side, that was Tallahassee. And it's like I'm in this like dark place and it's just kind of lonely. And it's like you're not really sure where you're supposed to be. It's like you still have things in this place, you're working on things in the new place, and it's like you're in this constant state of back and forth. And it's very like emotionally and physically and mentally draining. And I think you experienced a little bit of this too whenever you first moved to Fairhope because it's like a lot of times when you move to a new place, it often feels like you're leaving things unfinished. Um, and so it's like when I was leaving Pensacola, it almost felt unfinished because I was like, I was a big part of the church there. Like, I feel like I'm abandoning my friends. I feel like I'm just leaving all of this not finished. And it's a hard reality to realize that, life moves on, whether you're there or whether you're not. Um, and so the transition phase, it's like you want to stay where you are for as long as possible. At least for me, that's what it was. And it's like behind that Pensacola door, it was like goodness and it was faithfulness and it was joy and it was peace and it was love. And I wanted to be a part of that for as long as possible. And I was scared that if the door closed, I wouldn't get to experience that again. And so I was like, I had my foot in the door. I was like trying to keep it open for as long as possible. And this other door was opening into Tallahassee. And I was like, if this is an open door, why am I so scared to step into it? And why is it so hard for me to move into this new season? And, you know, God finally sat me down and he was like, Carissa, this is where I've called you to be. I've called you to come to Tallahassee, and this is where I want you to pour your time and invest your energy into because running back and forth all the time is draining you, and you don't have the capacity to keep going back and forth. And it's like, I don't need you in Pensacola anymore. I don't need you in Blountstown anymore. I need you in Tallahassee. And that was hard to realize too, because I mean, yes, you can still keep in touch and you can go back and visit, but it's like fully having to let go of that old season to fully step into the new one, to fully see all that God has prepared for you. It's really tough. And so in that hallway, I feel like you're really vulnerable because you're in this place where you just keep getting tossed around. And I think that's a really important time too, because that's where you can either lean into God or lean away from God. And, once I finally started investing my time and my energy into Pensacola or into Tallahassee, and then that's when I started to see the goodness and the mercies that God had for me here. Because in Tallahassee, it's like the church that I was a part of, we have SALT, which is the college ministry, and their verse is Luke 10:02, and it's the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And so being around all these people that had this passion and this energy to reach out to their fellow classmates and to advance the gospel, that really encouraged me. So I started to reach out to my classmates, and some of them really expressed interest, and some of them even started coming. And through that, I saw that, sometimes I think God puts us in places not necessarily for the degree, that's just an added bonus. But sometimes I think it's mainly for the people and for us to meet new people and to interact with these new people and to get connected with different people. And so that was really cool to see how God has like opened these different doors here since I've been able to invest my time and energy and to see how like he's working through that.
Wow, that's really powerful. And I liked how when you were talking with me about the hallway, you had mentioned, it's like God, you're like, sometimes God closes the door and he starts to open the door in another place. But when you're in the hallway, it's that in between what was and what is. And you
Mhm.
have, nobody talks about that waiting period of God taking you into a new season. And I think that you have modeled so well what it looks like to go when God has called you to go to Pensacola, to walk through that door when he started to close it, to walk through the hallway of transition, and then walk into the door of Tallahassee. And so I think it's been really cool as your sister to just watch as you have like walked in obedience as God has been calling you away and calling you back to a place where you didn't necessarily want to be, but in this place, you are still seeing God's goodness and you're still seeing people's lives being changed because of the place that He has put you in. And I also think it's a testament to who God is because He loves His people so much that He divinely called you back to Tallahassee to reach the people that only you could reach because you're here. And so I think that is just also another testament of the faithfulness of God. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, how do you hear God's voice?
How do I hear God's voice? Just like in general or just recently or
Like, just for you, like, what is the way that you feel like God speaks to you?
a lot of it is through reading my Bible. That's been like the main place recently. Like sometimes it changes. Sometimes it's more through music, sometimes it's through prayer. But like recently it's been through reading my Bible and um just digging into the word because recently, with the whole move to Tallahassee, and it hasn't been my favorite thing. Um you have to figure out how to be content and how to be joyful in any and every situation. And, Philippians 4:11 through 13 talks about that of, finding joy. And it's not from your circumstances or the environment around you, but it's from God and finding that contentment through that. And so that has been super helpful in the season. And, when you go to read your Bible, um, a lot of times I just pray and I just thank God for having access to the word and thank him for, allowing me to have the time with him and ask him to show me something. And a lot of times he does.
Yeah. What are you reading right now?
So I'm currently reading through Matthew.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I've just kind of been reading through the Bible, starting from Genesis, and so I finally made it to Matthew.
Nice. I love it. I love it. I love it. What advice would you give to college students who are in the middle of these transitions where maybe they're changing colleges, maybe they have just graduated and or about to graduate and are about to move to a college or into the workforce? What advice do you have for them?
I would definitely say get plugged into a church as soon as possible and get involved in that church, and because that's how you meet people and that's how you form that community. And finding that community is so important, especially when you first move away because you are on your own. And I remember when I first moved away, um, there were some Sundays where I was like, I didn't feel the need to go to church because I was like, nobody would know. Nobody knows who I am. I don't have my family around to know if I went to church or not. And so it's easy to, just not go and not do and just to fall away from what you believe. But my encouragement would be definitely get involved in a local church and get involved in like the different ministries that they have because that's where you find that support and that help during
Mm,
those difficult seasons.
that's so good. I was talking to somebody else today, and I we were talking about the importance of getting plugged into the local church. And when you find your friends within the local church, that is what changes everything, because your friends determine the quality and the direction of your life. And yeah, so it's very, very true. What have you learned about God through all of this that you didn't know before?
Ooh, that I didn't know before. I definitely learned about his goodness more through this whole process. And that was really cool to see because even though everything around me was changing and shifting, it was like God was still good and God was providing and God was taking care of me through it all. And I also really learned about his faithfulness and how to trust him through the different transitions and the different phases of life. Um, and it really grows your faith whenever you're put in those situations where you have to trust and just rely on him to lead and direct your next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you want to add or share before we close up today?
I think that's everything.
All right. So, Carissa, on this season of the podcast, I'm asking everybody one random question that has nothing to do with anything that we've talked about today. So,
Okay.
your random question for today is, what is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Um, I'd have to say a snail.
Ew. Wow.
Escargot, I guess. We're on a cruise and they had that option, and I tried it, and it was like chewy and gross. Not a fan.
Would you eat it again?
No.
All I need to know. Thank you. All right. Well, Carissa, thank you so much for joining us today. It is always a treat to get to talk to you. And I always love getting to hear how God is working in your life. And thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and your testimony over the past few years. I know it'll be so encouraging to so many people. And so, yeah, I'm just grateful for you. I love you very much, sis.
I love you too. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Alabaster Project.